Hey guys, welcome back to the Bulwark, our YouTube page. We are here once again with Ilyse Hogue, who has graciously written for us yet again on a topic that she's becoming a master of, which is the issue of gender, specifically how Democrats can and should appeal to men, but specifically, I think, white men, although not totally white men. So Ilyse was in Chicago. That's correct, right? You were there for the totality of the
I
convention?
was, yes.
Okay. And why not just sort of open it up? What was your impression of how the convention speakers tried to reach out to that constituency, which obviously is a big vulnerability for Democrats? What do you think worked and what did not work?
I was actually very pleasantly surprised to find it an extraordinarily boisterous, gender inclusive convention. I think that, I wrote this in the piece, Sam. I really think that what we saw was not just the idea that Democrats had gotten the wake up call that they need to throw some lines in for men to feel included in the party, but that they understood the greater assignment, that they had been yielding the field to Trump and his cohort for quite a long time, who were
Right.
introducing this incredibly toxic, incredibly fragile kind of masculinity that if they would just make a play for these guys, they could win. And I think we saw that, but we saw it in a way, and I sort of, like inclusive is a word that's thrown around, but I think we saw that they actually mastered the craft of saying, hey, welcome in, guys, without creating conditions where that shoved other people out of the tent. And that was a huge breath of fresh air.
Let's back up for a second here, because one of the first, our relationship with you, the Bulwark and you, kind of goes back to a sort of interesting inflection point, which was Donald Trump a couple weeks ago goes on Adin Ross's YouTube channel. Adin Ross is a kind of gamer YouTube personality. He's got like 1 million plus followers. You kind of picked up on that as something that Democrats should not be dismissive of, but should take seriously. And that's fed into all this stuff, this conversation that we've been having for several weeks now, which is, are Democrats properly attuned to what's going on there? But more importantly, how attuned Trump is to what's going on there. So can you talk a little bit about just sort of setting the stage for the convention and the work that Democrats did have to put in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would actually put this back towards Trump's initial run for office
2016,
in
yeah.
2016. And I think what was sort of received scant attention for understandable reasons is the role that this next generation of men who were sort of molded in the fire of the gender politics of the internet, came out of fighting about women's roles in video games, how they were kind of coming out of the woodwork and cutting their political teeth on supporting Trump. They
Right.
added to a coalition that included the sort of old school white supremacist, terrifying people, as well as the establishment Republicans who made transactional bargaining with Trump into a campaign. But because they
Well,
were
and Trump also sort of made overt appeals to like white working class union voters too. I mean, he wasn't just playing it
I think
safe.
that's totally right. I think that what we had seen is in the run up to 2016, the pride, the totally justifiable pride in having the first woman at the top of the ticket and Hillary Clinton juxtaposed with a man who was so, by any standards of society, kind of off-putting to women, would say things like, I grabbed her by the this.
When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. I can do anything.
Been accused of sexual predation.
Well, this is the Bulwark
right?
YouTube channel.
I get to say pussy. I get to say pussy. Excellent. Excellent. And so the idea was that any self-regarding man would never side with this guy, right? We were proven wrong. We were simply proven wrong. And so I think what we have realized in the ensuing 8 years, remember it's been 8 years, is that there was something real happening in the dislocation, and that's both economic and social dislocation of men. And you don't have to be a bad guy. You don't have to be a sexual predator to feel like, what is in it for me anymore? It's hard to earn a buck. It seems like the Democrats are focused on everyone else getting ahead except me. And that what created an opening for Trump, but all of the people around him to invest in grievance politics, and that Democrats were doing nothing to push back. Well, I think that's why you
see the sort of success of the anti-DEI campaigns,
right?
Even the stuff around curriculum in schools. Most of it is based around sort of like teaching, gender acceptability and things like that. It's all sort of like geared towards, no, in fact, young men are actually the persecuted people here. But now here comes
we saw all of that change.
I'm going to say, now comes a second historic female presidential candidate who has to stop and not make the same missteps as the first historic female presidential candidate on this front specifically. And that sets the stage for this convention. So what differences did you detect from Kamala Harris vis-a-vis Hillary Clinton in 2016?
Yeah, look, you have to understand, or your listeners, viewers have to understand, these are not only different women, but they're of different generations, and that the party got smarter, the movements around them got smarter. And so what you saw going into the convention is a truly inclusive approach that was saying, I don't have to prove myself as a woman. I am just going to lean into my bona fides as the best candidate for the job. And where Kamala Harris really threaded the needle, and we talked about this in the piece, is she exhibited that toughness, that need for protection that is not just a masculine quality, but it's an American quality, right? We want to protect our people. We want to lean into everything that is good. But she did it in a way that was clearly on the side of justice. She talked about tougher border enforcement, but she did it in the same breath as making sure that those who are preying on our children through drugs and sexual predation, we're not going to get away with that.
I fought against the cartels who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings, who threaten the security of our border and the safety of our communities.
And I think that exhibition of embracing her inner prosecutor with all of the toughness and the unapologetic go-getism, while folding that in with this is for the benefit of all of us, set the tone for a convention where everybody, including men, were saying, there's something here for me.
What about the choice of Tim Walz as VP? Obviously not the conventionalism, but there was a fair amount of people who were saying, look, Josh Shapiro is the choice. He's the guy. He's got Pennsylvania. We need him. And I'm not trying to cast, any bad judgment on Josh Shapiro, but it does seem to me that the Walz selection, in retrospect, I have the benefit of hindsight here, that the Walz selection was almost deliberately done to make the ticket more palatable to that type of dude, basically, right? The sort of like football coach, Minnesota, chicken and pork eating dude who likes a beer, right? Like, I don't think Josh Shapiro was going to hit that vein as well as Tim Walz is, but that gives me that's the perspective of I have hindsight here.
Look,
is that your read of it?
I argued hard in the pages, if there were pages of the Bulwark, that they needed a man on the ticket, right? But Kelly was my guy. I thought he hit this profile of like a
astronaut.
Really strong, the astronaut. Every little boy wants to be an astronaut, like the really strong male leader, but who could still be the mensch that supported the woman as he did his wife, Gabby Giffords. And like you said, 2020 hindsight, it is hard to argue now that she was masterful in her pick of Tim Walz. And I think, I had a male friend say to me at the convention, it's all about football and freedom. Football and freedom. And I think that
they're calling him coach for a reason. They're not calling him governor.
Right. The minute that Coach Walz took the stage alongside his actual team of football players, right? And talked about winning the trophy for, shooting his rifle.
I know guns. I'm a veteran. I'm a hunter. And I was a better shot than most Republicans in Congress, and I got the trophies to prove it.
He actually embraced that sense of archetypal masculinity that so many people in our country relate to. I'm a Texan. Look, it is football and freedom where I'm from, but he did it in a way that also exhibited the best of what that can be. It is compassionate. It is supportive, and it is not afraid to lift up and partner with women, because Coach Walz knows that when women succeed, we all succeed.
And so I guess the same sort of vein, second gentleman Doug Emhoff's speech, it was obviously quite different than Coach Walz. Doug, as a fellow tribesman, does not play football. I will say, I could say that, I think, but he more or less talked.
He
about
does make brisket, though. Sam.
He makes a mean well, yes. Again, fellow tribesman makes brisket, makes Passover brisket. That's our Super Bowl, is the brisket. But he did kind of give a permission structure, I guess, to say, look, it's totally acceptable to be a man who is supportive of your more accomplished wife.
Yeah.
Wherever she's needed, however she's needed, Kamala rises to the occasion. And she did it for me and our family. And now that the country needs her, she's showing you what we already know. She's ready to lead.
Which is not easy. It's not easy for a lot of men still to get over that hurdle. And I think that was kind of the role he played. And then I guess I want to also ask you about the two sons, Gus Waltz and Doug's son, who made the video. So I'll open the floor to you here.
I think that Doug has, since Kamala became senator and then ascended to vice president, shown his willingness to support his wife at every step of the way. And that is something that all of us in marriage dream about, having a mutually supportive partnership. I thought personally what was so profound was Cole's video introduction, where he talks about bearing witness to that next level of support. Right. Realizing that one person in the partnership is kind of on a rocket ship to the moon. And that requires sacrifice, and not pretending that it's not sacrifice, but that that's how so many families in this country function, is understanding that there is a sacrifice to be made when one partner is on the pathway to mega success, and that it is actually a really important thing to be able to do, to step away from his job as the hotshot entertainment lawyer, but not pretend you don't have some grief about it, and being able to hold that grief hand in hand with the support that you're offering your spouse. And I think that's
I just thought that I thought they were sort of interesting because they didn't explicitly do this, but they were trying to almost recast what male strength is, right? Like, male strength is not like, I have to be the breadwinner and I have to have the most successful career and I have to be the one in the spotlight, but it can be, look, I made sacrifices for, my family, and it's benefited everyone, and that is male strength. And so I was it was an interesting juxtaposition, obviously, to Trump, who, is like the sort of alpha.
Makes sacrifices for no one.
Makes sacrifices for no one, puts his career and his self-interest first, and everyone around him is sort of like, yes, and they serve him. And so I don't know if it sells, but it's interesting that this is the project that the Harris ticket is now on.
And I think that's a perfect segue to what happened with Coach Walz and his son Gus. I mean, what Trump is kind of known for is the rod, not the hugs. He has pretty openly shown that he sees any imperfection on the part of his sons as a negative reflection on himself. Those, it's hard to feel sorry for those guys because they've taken on so much of their father, but I do feel sorry for them. You hear terrible stories about the way they were treated growing up. And there could not have been a starker contrast between that model of family and the model that I think we all aspire to, which was what was on display from the stage when Tim Walz was speaking. He spoke openly about his struggles with his wife to have a family. He took them on his own. And then he talked about how his children are his whole world. And when his son, who we now know, but I don't think many of us knew going in.
I actually did not know.
Yeah, I did not know either. Is neurodivergent and, experiences things differently, became overcome with emotion and cried. He embraced that. Mm-hmm. He showed it as a sign of strength to embrace his son, embrace the tears, embrace the joy. And something really interesting happened that we don't see a lot. When the right wing tried to turn that into a negative, when they tried to, take that word weird and throw it back at Gus and his father, Tim, it flopped like you have not seen a political flop in a long time.
I remember sort of the infamous 1992 interview with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and they were talking about careers, and she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't go home and bake cookies. Like, I chose to have a career.
I suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies and had teas, but what I decided to do was to fulfill my profession, which I entered before my husband was in public life.
And she specifically mentioned baked cookies. The reason I bring this up is because, and this is maybe my own personal thing, but I'm fascinated by the role that food plays in this campaign. Like, it's everywhere. Like, Tim Walz is talking about how unadventurous his spice palette is.
Like, I have white guy tacos and
what does
like
that
black,
mean? Like mayonnaise and tuna? What are you doing?
pretty much ground beef and cheese.
That's
and,
okay. Do you put any flavor in it?
No.
You know, Kamala, JD Vance has a weird interaction with donut workers, right?
Everything, yeah. I mean, a lot of glazed here, some sprinkle stuff, some of these cinnamon rolls, just whatever makes sense.
But Kamala Harris is pretty open about the fact that she loves to cook. And among the recipes are cookies. And she's like, I mean, she posted this up in 2019, 2020. And of course, she talked about it on the convention stage. She wasn't talking about the cookies. She was talking about the Indian food that she would make as a family. And it's just that contrast where Hillary Clinton had to be explicit. I don't go home and bake. And Kamala Harris can just say, you know what? I do cook. Yeah. And I'm also going to like have the most lethal fighting force in the world. Like, I feel like we've come a fair bit of way here.
I think that, you know, what the sort of next chapter to that Hillary Clinton story is that she had to post her own chocolate chip cookie recipe.
Was that true?
Yeah,
you might be right about that. Yeah.
No, I remember it quite well. And I think many, many women experienced it as a humiliation to her.
Yeah.
That this high-powered lawyer had to post her cookie recipe, and then it was picked apart, and everyone decided Barbara Bush's was better. And how denigrating. What we saw this week was the opposite. It was the ability of the best candidate on the platform being able to embrace all components of herself, the tough prosecutor, the successful lawyer, the senator, the vice president, who also still picks up the phone from her kids, still cooks dinner and takes pride in that, still is the center of the family. And I think that's what most Americans are looking for right now, because that's how we all live our lives.
Yeah, I'm living it right now. I'm about to go make dinner too. All right, Ilyse, thank you so much. We got to keep you writing. I really appreciate it. You can check out her article on thebulwark.com as always. And of course, as always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We thrive on subscriptions, and share it too. There's a lot of good stuff here. Ilyse, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.